It's the big countdown to the budget. The bigger question is, what will this government focus on, Mr. Jaitley, to balance out the fiscal fix and the need of the rural economy, which has been ailing after 3 consecutive weak monsoons? What's in store? Will it be a budget for Bharat? That's the question that we'll pose to an esteemed panelist joining us right now. Abhijit Sen, professor at the Jawaharlal Nehru University; Satish Chandra, Director General, Fertilizers Association of India; Madan Sabnavis, Chief Economist at Care Ratings, watches the agri economy very closely; and M.K. Dhanuka, MD at Dhanuka Agri Tech as well. Mr. Chandra, let me start with you. You were also part of the pre-budget consultation, sir, as I recall. What is the need of the hour? Take us through your assessment of rural economy before I get to the specifics of what the requirements of the fertilizer industry really stand at.
Well, as far as the fertilizer sector, I think, is concerned, if you look at it in context of whatever the drought last 2 years which has taken, but if you look at the fertilizer sales, it is positive this year. We are up with the urea for more than 4%, DAP up by almost 20%, NPK is up. So fertilizer sector, well, our issues are there, usual issues which are outstanding year after year, consecutively from government to government. Non-payment of subsidy, outstanding going up. So this is one of the major issues which we are facing, the fertilizer industry is facing, and we don't find any solution to it, either even in the change of the government. Situation remains the same. Our bills are not being paid. Outstandings have touched 50,000 crores.
50,000 crore outstanding, as Mr. Chandra is saying.
Hello.
Year after year, the budget, the same request from the fertilizer sector, timely payment of subsidy, even as that subsidy bill, at least for fertilizer, continues to grow. Madan, you watch the agri economy very closely. It's been a terrible time. It seems like suddenly the market's waking up to the fact that there have been weak monsoons, which has started to hurt the rural economy quite badly. Take us through how, what is your assessment of how it is on rural India right now?
So actually, if we look at agriculture, I think we have to distinguish between what the central government can do and what the state governments can do.
Yeah.
Because agriculture is a state subject, and the focus of bringing about development is more in the area of what the state governments do. Also, considering the fact that there are higher devolutions going to the states, I think it will be their prerogative to use the resources in the best possible manner to tackle those issues. Now, this said, I think as far as the central government is concerned, I think we saw a very useful scheme which they brought out, the crop insurance, which has already been announced. And I think that's probably going to be a very important part of this particular budget, because they have to make certain allocations for the premium which is going to be paid. And it's a very positive move in the sense that it actually addresses also the issues which banks have, because very often what happens is that when you have a drought-like situation, there has to be loan waivers which come about, which actually affects also the banking system. So I think that's something which has already been done. Otherwise, from the central budget, to my mind, there's nothing much we can expect. The government normally does pay some kind of obeisance to bringing about improvements in irrigation, specific crops, oilseeds and pulses in particular. But beyond that, I think agriculture is going to be still remain the forte of state governments. And the current government will probably just reiterate what their broad ideology is in terms of how much credit should be going there. But nothing more, I would think, because I think the rest will have to be done by the state governments.
Dr. Abhijit Sen also joins us. Dr. Sen, thank you so much for taking our time. I want to get your sense of the assessment of how the rural economy is really doing ahead of the budget, and how critical is it after the failed monsoons and the deteriorating state of rural India for the government to put extra effort and walk the extra mile in this budget for Bharat?
Well, I'm sure there will be a lot in the budget which will talk about agriculture, and all sorts of things will be announced. But usually these are there in every budget, and a lot of it is off-budget items which are being talked about. No, I think let's get it straight. I think we've had 2 bad monsoons in a row. This has gone hand in hand with falling commodity prices internationally. Farmers have been squeezed, therefore, both on the output side as well, for a lot of farmers, on the price side as well. Now, under those circumstances, the tendency is for debt to go up, and I think we are seeing some evidence of that in terms of whatever the consequences of debt default are. Sometimes they lead to even suicides. And I think, therefore, the situation that we have is similar, but possibly somewhat better than we had, say, just after the 2002 drought. I mean, that's, that's roughly 12, 13 years ago. On the other hand, the bright side this time, but it was true then as well, is that consumers are less worried because although, pulse prices are up, some vegetable prices are up, because of the international situation, inflation is pretty low. In fact, it's very likely after 2 bad harvests in a row, you're going to get a very, very good harvest next year. So really what the government should be doing is try to ensure that a good monsoon next year translates into a good and sustainable agricultural growth path. I think the previous speaker mentioned the insurance thing. That doesn't quite do it. That's really it's a safety net. It's an important measure. But I think there are other things which governments ought to do. And I think, again, the previous speaker was saying that it's really the responsibility of state governments, that it is. It's especially so after the 14th Finance Commission. So state governments will be expected to do things, but I think the central government cannot actually shirk a responsibility for seeing that the underlying productivity growth is kept up or even improved. And on that, I think what I would really like to see from this budget is that there are certain ways of spending money on agriculture which are not particularly useful. For example, I think you have a huge, what the central government spends, much of it is subsidies.
Yeah.
The main subsidy is fertilizer.
Yeah.
They could easily cut some of that and put it into much better use.
Let me bring that point forward, Dr. Sen, because we have Satish Chandar with us, who's representing the fertilizer sector. Satish, respond to that. Dr. Sen saying that you can easily cut down fertilizer subsidy and use that in other places. How would you respond to that?
I absolutely agree with Professor Abhijit Sen. In fact, we have been pleading with the government, the earlier government and the present government, please take away this subsidy, reduce the subsidy. It is not helping the farmers, it is not helping the soil, it is not helping the production and productivity. So this money, this huge money which we are spending on the subsidy is hurting everyone, including the industry. We are not being paid, we are fully controlled, we have no freedom. The policies of the government of Make in India, ease of doing business in India are totally alien, absolutely not applicable as far as the fertilizer sector is concerned. So yes, the subsidy needs to be reduced. Urea, 75% is the subsidy. Now how can you do any economic activity where subsidy is 75%? It is leading to imbalanced use of fertilizers, spoiling the soil health, impacting the productivity, industry is getting sick, government has to shell out huge amounts of money, problem of fiscal deficit, solution is clear to everyone, please reduce the subsidy, give the subsidy directly to the farmers, use this money for reaching out to the farmers through better instruments. Right.
I'm going to get Mr. M.K. Dhanuka also in, who, MD of Dhanuka Agritech, who's got skin in the business as well. What is the kind of pressure, Mr. Dhanuka, that you're seeing in rural India, given the monsoon deficit that we've faced, and how do you think it can be elevated?
Basically, government should increase the irrigation facility, because in India, because of the deficit of monsoon, the farmer face the maximum challenges. In India, we have only 40% irrigated area and 60% is still rain-fed. So if the irrigation facility are increased, then farmer will not depend on monsoon and can have the crop, because in the states wherever irrigation facilities are there, always we have bumper crops like Punjab, Haryana, UP, etc.
Madan, would DBT help for subsidy as well in terms of fertilizer as well? Would that be a more efficient system? Because as the fertilizer sector is continuing to be, troubled by, outstanding bills, the ideal way to make it completely market oriented. But in the process of that shift, how critical is it to do DBT sort of a scheme for fertilizer as well in a year that you're probably going to see National Security, Food Security Act also getting implemented in a larger way?
Now, actually, when you're talking of DBT, I would be a bit cautious when you're talking of using it for the food subsidy. Now, using it for fertilizers, using it for LPG, I think it's been fairly successful because it's easy to identify the beneficiaries. But when you're talking of food subsidy, we should remember there are two issues here. One is that have we actually chosen or rather targeted the right kind of people whom we're reaching out to? And the second part is, of course, in terms of how do we actually adjust to prices? Because we should remember that once we give a direct benefit transfer, we're giving a fixed amount of money to buy certain food grains. And given the fact that the prices are quite different across the country, and also the price inflation is quite different across the country, there will be a problem in terms of really earmarking what kind of funds has to be given, what kind of pricing has to go in, because they'll be different for different territories. So we're not even getting into the issue of saying whether the money is going to be used in the right manner or not. So I think DBT for food subsidy should be, I think we should think through it carefully before we embark on it. There's also the issue of saying that will there be higher food inflation, because the moment we are talking in terms of every individual going to the market and buying their share of rice and wheat, there would be a tendency for prices also to increase. Today what happens is there's a specified quality which is being provided at a fixed price by the government. Yeah. And this kind of thing, which as I told you would work well for fertilizers, works well for LPG or for kerosene. But the moment we come to food subsidy and trying to improve the system, we need to really get the logistics right before we go ahead with it.
Dr. Sen, come in on this, because we speak at a time where the fiscal deficit is much in conversation. Industrialists are asking government to do the heavy lifting as private investment is still not back on the table. One thing we've never seen is aggressive public investment in agriculture. So the big question is farm investment versus farm subsidy. How would you balance that equation out?
You see, this is a difficult take. It's difficult because much of it will have to be done by state governments. Traditionally, the big investors on the agricultural sector or agricultural infrastructure, roads, irrigation and everything, is really the states. It's not the central government. And therefore, I think for the central government to start pitching in, it's going to overstretch itself. What the central government normally does is its big items of expenditure have been really on the subsidy side or on price support side, those sorts of things. It does have a large budget on the agricultural sector in research and in trying to part finance certain state activities, mainly on certain crops, certain technology transfer types of programs, and recently also in horticulture in a big way. I think really what needs to be emphasized is that the central government's job is therefore not to be the big investor in agriculture. It is to be the agency which gets states to think that this is an important area for them to invest in.
Yeah.
So it's to incentivize states and to help out states which do not have enough money, and most importantly, to guide states on where the investment might actually pay off.
Yeah.
Because, for example, take irrigation. I think over the last two plans, we've spent huge amounts on major and medium irrigation. But the actual amount of irrigated land under surface irrigation has not increased at all. Because you keep spending money on building new stuff, some of it doesn't get constructed, And in the meantime, because of poor maintenance, a lot of the previously irrigated stuff goes simply disappears.
Yeah.
So there has to be an idea at the central level in terms of ideas to say that, look here, this is what's important, and we're going to finance you if you do it.
So irrigation is going to be a big one, especially for horticulture and pulses as well, where large parts of it still remains unirrigated, and that's where the price problems also start coming in. Gentlemen, we'll take a short break. The other side, we take up the conversation of rural India, and is agriculture the only way to get growth back? Are there other avenues the government needs to look at? More on that after a short break. You're watching the Budget Bet, and the big question, does this need to be a budget for Bharat? What does rural India really need from Mr. Jaitley? M.K. Dhanuka from Dhanuka Agritech is still with us, along with Professor Abhijit Sen, Madan Sabnavis and Satish Chandra, representing the fertilizer industry as well. Mr. Dhanuka, thank you for being so patient. I want to get a sense of what your expectations from this budget are before I throw open the debate on when NREGA really needs to stand with this government.
As an industry, we would request the government, and through our associations we are taking up this issue, that all the other agri inputs, that is seeds, fertilizers and even agri equipments, they don't have the excise on their products, while the pesticides have around 12.5% excise duty, due to which the pesticides become costlier for the farmers. The government should abolish excise duty on this agri input also, because this is most important and crucial, because it works as insurance for the farmers. As per information, 30% crops are damaged because of the pests and diseases, and if the farmers use the pesticides, he can increase the production. In India, still we are consuming one of the lowest pesticides in the world. So the usage of pesticides should be promoted, and we hope that by increasing the usage of pesticides, we can save at least 10-15% of our losses in the production.
Talking about industry and what the industry wants, Satish, come in on this. How does the government encourage domestic production at this point?
Yeah, you see, as far as the domestic production is concerned, if you look at P&K fertilizers, our companies are now operating at 60%. Now the real problem is for production of DAP, NPKs, SSP, etc., is that the duty on the raw materials and the duty on the finished product is same, which is 5%. Now we are import dependent. We have to bring all the raw materials. Now, if the duty is same, well, we are at a disadvantage, because the subsidy is same, either it is domestically produced or imported. So we have been pleading with the government. This is a simple economic principle, that the duty on the raw material has to be lower than on the finished product. DAP, there is a bound rate of duty. So even the government cannot increase in the present circumstances. So we are telling that at least on phosphoric acid and ammonia, at least reduce the duty from 5 to 2.5%, which is a very reasonable demand. So this is one for increasing the production. Similarly, for the domestic production of urea, we are operating at more than 100%. Now, if we don't operate at more than 100%, all the fertilizer companies, all the units are making losses. So we can just reduce our losses by producing beyond 100%.
Yeah.
So there again, the duty on the LNG, which we import in a very substantial quantity, is 5%. So there also our request is, please reduce the duty. If you cannot make it nil or 1%, give us some nominal relief. Bring it from 5 to at least 2% or 2.5%. So this is one for making more fertilizer production in India.
Right.
Similarly, the urea policy. The urea policy, one of course is that we have a lot of issues in the policy. I would not like to go, but please pay us in time.
Yeah.
My outstanding are more than 50,000 crores for the industry.
Yep.
These are as earlier years as 2008. We require on average about 70,000 crores. So we need 1.2 lakh crore. So please pay us, because our interest costs are going. We are only paying to the raw materials and we are paying to the banks in the interest. And the whole of the industry half the industry is sick. So our request is, please pay us in the time so that we can produce and give the quality fertilizers to the farmers, reduce the import duties on raw material, don't keep same as on finished product, and please give us the adequate budget so that the payments to the industry can be made. Please relax all the controls, all the movement controls. Please allow us to do the ease of business in India, which totally fertilizer sector is now more and more being controlled. On one side, we talk of ease of doing the business. On the other side, more restrictions are put. We cannot move our stocks. We need supply plans. At every step, we are fully controlled, and the controls are increasing day by day instead of being relaxed.
Very valid points, the liquidity need of the hour. Madan, let me get you in on the NREGA debate at this point. Is there scope or need for the government to raise NREGA allocations in this budget, or do you think that's going to spiral off another wage inflation spiral that we saw last time around?
No, in fact, on NREGA, I have a slightly different view, because I think it is a program which is absolutely essential, given the fact that we have a huge vulnerable section of society which is being provided with sustenance on account of NREGA. In fact, the last 2 years when we had a drought-like situation, I think the NREGA program has been very useful in terms of providing them with income. Now, this whole issue of saying that it's leading to wage inflation, I don't think it's really founded on any firm things, because if you really see how the NREGA works, people are provided employment between two particular seasons, which really means that it's not the destitute who are being provided an income, but it's people who already have a regular income. Between two seasons, you're giving them this income of the NREGA wage. Now, if you look at the kind of total amount of spending on NREGA, let's assume it's around 35,000 crores, of which around 70% goes in terms of wage. We're talking of 25,000 crores. Can 25,000 crores, even if it's spent only on agricultural goods, which is not really the case, since a lot of it is spent on consumer durable goods. And given the fact that around 20% of our, 18% of maybe our GDP is coming from agriculture, can it really influence the prices? The answer is actually no. So I think when we're talking in terms of NREGA influencing inflation, I don't think that's a valid point. Now, the only other point which I'd like to make on NREGA is that we have also criticized it for saying that it's fairly worthless, in the sense that we don't really sort of produce any productive goods through the NREGA. It's more a case of giving a dole to farmers. But here I think we should try and integrate the NREGA program with other activities of the government and other ministries, so that the same labor which is being used can be used, say, by the Ministry of Urban Development, where you're constructing certain projects, or maybe the Road Ministry, where we're constructing roads. By productively using the same people and paying them the wage, I think we can make the NREGA program more effective from the point of view of productivity. Yeah. But in terms of allocation, I think it's absolutely essential. It should not be frozen. We should be increasing it, because it provides a lot of support to farmers.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, completely out of time. A lot more questions for all of you, but completely strapped with time right now. That's a wrap on this edition of the Budget Bet, with a special focus on the rural India. Thank you so much for watching.